Um, I'm going to share my screen here, and let's hope it works. Could some people raise their hand if they can see the screen okay? Thank you, Liz. Okay, good. So I want to start with land recognition that where I am speaking from is Ohlone Tamyan people land originally. And not only was the land taken away from them, but they were discriminated against by not being declared a tribe. So they were not able to take advantage of the whatever programs there were for Native people. So what's a Christian to do about climate change is my title here. And I'm in a way representing two different groups, Urban Sanctuary San Jose, which is my church. And the picture here is right outside the front door. We had a Sunday gathering in this building for some time, but we do get together at 10 a.m. on Sundays. And I love this, the idea that Jesus was an agitator. Our church was the stimulus for Recovery Cafe San Jose, which is a healing community for people suffering from homelessness, mental illness, drug addiction. And it's really an amazing organization. And now the church has sponsored, like it did with Recovery Cafe San Jose many years ago, sponsoring the new organization that I and some friends started called This Is What We Did. And so let's jump into this. Oh, and please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat room. We'll take questions live in a little bit. But I wanted to start with how I got here, where I am today. My son, who is right there, is now 43. So this is, and I have two different feelings about use at that time. One is it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And there was so much negativity. It was amazing. And ultimately that caused me to decide to start an organization, Positive Coaching Alliance, some 20 some years. Mike Galley and others here have been involved with that and supporters of it. And when one of the things we accomplished in 20 plus years was really a sea change in what good coaching is all about. At the time we started, the iconic coach in the United States was Bobby Knight. And because he was so famous and was identified with coaching, youth coaches often felt that they needed to be kind of nasty, snarly, really hard nosed with kids, even young kids. And now if you look at who the iconic coaches are, and we went through the Phil Jackson, of course, and Steve Kerr and Herm Edwards at the University of Arizona now, or Arizona State actually. And so I think we accomplished something. We created a movement, and we didn't eliminate negative coaching, but we did change the idea of what good coaching is. That it's now pretty well accepted that good coaching is positive coaching. The other thing that we did is we trained a lot of people. When I started out, the first workshop, Sandy and I were talking about that today, the first workshop we did, there were 5 people there, and 3 of them were PCA employees. And when I stepped away from the CEO position last year, we were doing 3,500 live workshops per year, which comes out to almost 10 a day on average. Well, I took a sabbatical, and I really wanted to learn more about climate change. I knew it was a problem. I really had no idea how much of a problem it was. And I realized that there was an ultimate question that I was being asked, and it was, what did you do? You, Jim Thompson, what did you do to fight climate change? And I could see that I wanted to be able to say that I did something, that I did everything I could, because this is such an important issue. And I want to say that this is personal for me, highly personal. This is my 5-year-old granddaughter Lila on the left and my 10-year-old grandson Rafi on the right. They're very physical kids. You know, if this was a place that was swings and slides, they'd get bored right away. But you'll see Lila, you know, doing some amazing, getting ready to do some amazing thing. And the fact that, and once in a while she'll fall from that distance and it doesn't, you know, doesn't stop her at all. And one of the things is an incredible enthusiast for basketball, and basketball went away. Actually, his whole school went away. So highly personal for me. And what I'd like you to do right now is just take a minute. I'll time you for it. And think about the people that you really care about, that you want to have a decent planet for. Actually try to see them. Visualize them. One of the things I learned as a youth coach is how important it is to visualize. If we see something, it makes it more real for us and more likely that we can do something about it. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. Really see the people that you want to have a decent planet as they grow up. Now, when I started Positive Coaching Alliance, or when I was thinking about starting Positive Coaching Alliance, I could see the symptoms. A woman emailed me, her son could not wait for baseball to start. And he had such a bad experience with that coach and that organization that he didn't want to play anymore. And she said, well, where's your glove? And he had gone out in the backyard and buried it. He got a shovel and buried it in the ground. He was so distraught about baseball. A softball coach in Philadelphia, I believe, was hit in the head with a bat by the parent of one of his players, a daughter. And that's just unacceptable. And I kind of understand it, because his daughter was a junior in high school and she was invited to go to the junior prom. And the coach said if she went to her junior prom instead of going to practice, that she would be kicked off the team. But it wasn't that she was missing some game. It wasn't that she was missing a championship game. She was missing a practice. And her dad he hit him in the head with a bat. Again, not at all acceptable, but it kind of shows the problems with a win at all cost mentality and all the negativity that flows from that. Now, in thinking about climate change, it was like, okay, there's symptoms, and we're going to talk about those symptoms are, but what's the problem? What's the cause? My roommate 50 years ago, named Craig, we were living with a group of people in a house in St. Paul, Minnesota, and he got an old Volkswagen bus it looked a little bit like this. I asked Craig if he had a picture of the bus, and he didn't have one anymore, but it looked a lot like this. And he was working out in the backyard, and I happened to be and all of a sudden I heard him screaming. And I ran out there, and his hand was caught in between two pieces of metal that were squeezing like crazy. And I looked at it, and I grabbed a plier, and as hard as I can, I squeezed on that plier because I wanted to take away Craig's pain, and nothing happened. Well, a friend of ours, David, came running out, And maybe it was because David grew up on a farm and I grew up in town, but he grabbed the player and he saw immediately what the problem was. And he put pressure on the right place and it opened up those two pieces of metal so Craig could remove his hand. I think there's something like that going on in climate change, where there's so much activity, there's so much that people are doing, and it's like squeezing as hard as they can in the wrong place. So I really want to be able to act effectively, to see what the cause of the problem is. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. Now, this clip of the newsroom, if people remember the newsroom, I can't believe it was 6 years ago that it ended. It was three years, and it was on HBO. And this clip was circulating. The link to it on YouTube is there, but you can search for it, newsroom climate debate, and you can find it. And it's well worth watching, because if you're a fan of The Office, the guest who is playing an employee of the Environmental Protection Agency was a guy who played Toby in The Office. So what did Toby have to say when he was questioned? Jeff Daniels, the anchor, said, can you sum up this report for us? And he said, yeah, I can do that. He said, first of all, sea level rise. He said the last time there was as much carbon in the atmosphere as there is now, so many million years ago, the sea level was 80 feet higher than it is today. There's two things you need to know. The sea level was 80 feet higher than it is today. And then he paused, and Jeff Daniels said, what's the other thing? He said, humans can't breathe underwater. Well, it's not quite that bad, but it's pretty bad, because the estimates that have been made on the impact of sea level rise have been that scientists use to say when is Miami, when is San Francisco, when is London, when are they in danger? They used satellite photography, and in some cases they used the top of trees as the elevation. So our cities, at which 50% of the people in the world live within 120 miles of, are in much greater danger sooner than predicted. Mass migrations, the conflict in Syria, which seems totally like a tragedy, somewhere about 5 to 6 million immigrants, and disrupted business as usual in England. Some people say that the reason in Europe, that the reason England started the Brexit, leaving the common market, was because they didn't want all these brown people to come in, and if they're out of the market, they wouldn't have to deal with them. Well, the estimates are now that climate change, we're going to see somewhere between not 5 or 6 million, between 200 million and 1 billion people forced to migrate. And James Hansen, who was like the Paul Revere who signaled for NASA and tested for Congress problem, said it's going to make our governments aren't going to deal with that. It's going to be ungovernable. Food and water shortages. Last year, 20 million acres of farmland in the Midwest was flooded, and much of that land isn't able to be farmed yet. So we're going to have food and water shortages. Now, again, this was in 2014, 6 years ago, spread of deadly diseases. And I just read, I got several friends sent me this article that they're seeing anthrax in the Arctic Circle now because the permafrost is melting and dead animals. So the reindeers, and I think we're going to see more. The idea that, well, when we get a vaccine for COVID-19, everything's going to be great. I don't think we're going to see the end of the deadly diseases. This is a quote from Toby: endless wildfires, way too many to keep under control. 2 years ago, um, the entire town of Paradise, California was destroyed. And it was a big deal. And this year we had, I think, 500 wildfires in California. It's, his statement is way too many to keep under control is exactly right. And then this is the one that, that got the anchor to say, like, storms with the power to level cities, blacken the sky, and create permanent darkness. Now, this is fictional, but the scenario that the EPA administrator in this show presented is reflects science. Now, the Defense Department, again, this is 2014, so 6 years ago, labeled climate change a threat multiplier, because whatever problems we have, I was talking to a friend recently and about wildfires and the air quality. He said, oh, we've had fires before, but not like this. And the Defense Department is on top of this, we're actually talking about whatever problems we have are going to get worse. And there's a key concept here that called sacrifice zones. We can't have climate change without sacrifice zones. Now, one example of a sacrifice zone is the city of Houston, Texas. About 25% of the people in Houston are Black, and somewhere between 75 and 100% of all the pollution in the city are in Black areas. Those are sacrifice zones. I'm from North Dakota, and the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Standing Rock Reservation became considered, nobody says this, so we're going to make them a sacrifice zone, but they became considered a sacrifice zone. When I was in high school, I played high school football, and my favorite team was the Green Bay Packers. And if you see the guy right in the middle, he's got a Green Bay Packers green and yellow hat on. I love this picture. And why would I say that the Standing Rock Reservation is a sacrifice zone? Because there was an earlier route for this pipeline. And the people in Bismarck who didn't want it to happen didn't have to demonstrate. They didn't have to go out in 20 below weather and demonstrate. They didn't have to risk having dogs and water cannons. Some people got rerouted to cover. And if you look at the reservation where they get their no protest was needed, because the 95% white people who live in Bismarck were not in a sacrifice zone. I'm in a book study group right now with the UU Church in downtown Bay, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And the book is really blowing my mind. Ibram X. Kendi, do nothing climate policy is racist policy. And the reason is because the people at the front lines of fighting for the stopping these pipelines, fighting to save the Amazon rainforest and the rainforest in the Congo, are Black, Indigenous, people of color, poor people. And the reverse of this is true as well. And that is, one of the best things we can do to fight racism is to fight climate change. So, a talk on what's a Christian to do about climate change. So let's take some wisdom from the Old Testament. And this Bible might look a little ratty to you. It was given to me by my grandmother, Lula Score, in 1959, and I cherish it. Where there is no vision, the people perish. I think this is very true, because vision is a story. Vision is a story with a sense of possibility. And if we don't have a story with a sense of possibility, we do perish. And stories are incredibly important, because They determine how we behave. This organization, News Stories, and their website was started by two friends of mine in Spokane, Washington. And I love this quote: "We don't live in the world, we live in our stories about the world." So we need a strong story to be able to fight climate change. So let's talk about 3 stories about climate change. Here's one. Hey, it's not so bad. My friend who said, "Oh, we've had wildfires before," is saying, "Yeah, it's under control. You know, maybe I need to do a few things that aren't too inconvenient for me. But you know, our leaders will take care of it. Technology will fix it. You know, what me worry?" Not a strong story if we're going to really fight to protect the planet for our kids and grandchildren. The second one is global collapse, and this is the one that the Toby character on the video clip, you know, and Jeff Daniels at the anchor kept saying, you know, come on, people are starting the weekend. Let's find a more positive way to say this. And Toby says, well, okay, if we listen to the scientists, if we do everything we can, no, there's nothing we can do. That's not a strong story for climate change either. So let's try a third one. The car crash. Now, maybe it's a little weird that a car crash story is the empowering story, but it is. I was driving down from my office in Palo Alto to San Jose, south on 101 a while back, and I got 2 big semis on either side of me, and I realized, whoa, if you them slides over, I'm not in ignition. So I can't remember if I speeded up or slowed down, but I got out of that situation. And here's why the car crash story is a strong story and one that we should embrace. We are going, if we think of the climate crisis as a car crash, we are going to hit that other. There's just no car crash. The question is, since we know we can't avoid hitting that car, is there anything we can do? Should we slam on the brakes? And the answer is yes. We should slam on the brakes as hard as we can, because the difference between having a car crash at 100 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour versus 45 or 35 miles an hour makes all the difference in the world. But we can slam on the brakes. Now, there's a really important concept to make that car crash story work for us. That's called the Stockdale paradox. Collins, who wrote one of the best-selling business books of all time, Good to Great, had an office at the Stanford Business School right across the street from Admiral James Stockdale. Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking prisoner of war in Vietnam during the Vietnam War in the so-called Hanoi Hilton. And Jim had lunch with him one day, and he said, what did you learn from this? And Admiral Stockdale said, you have to confront the brutal facts. He said, the optimists didn't make it. The optimists in war and would say, oh, we'll be out here by Christmas. And then they weren't out here by Christmas. Oh, we'll be out of here by Valentine's Day. And they weren't. And he said they died of a broken heart. We've got to confront the brutal facts. And we have to maintain total faith that we can prevail. If we deny the brutal facts, we deny that we're going to hit that other car, and if we don't do some really big things, we're going to hit it really hard. And a lot of people are going to die. A lot of people die no matter what, but we can save a lot of. But we've got to confront the brutal facts, and he said we got to maintain total faith that he can prevail. Well, I don't have total faith that we can prevail, but I have a friend who's a Navy SEAL, and one of their slogans is, I may die, but I will never quit. And that's how I feel about climate change. I may be unsuccessful. Maybe we may be able to to bring that car only down from 100 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour and still, the planet is destroyed. But I'm not going to quit. I'm going to stay with it forever. I'm going to confront the brutal facts. Now, there's a crucial part of our car crash story. I'm going to get off the downer stuff in a second here, but there's a part to this car crash story. This is a quote by Bill McKibben, who more than anyone else in the world has tried to have us come to our senses about climate change. He says, I thought we were in an argument, but we were in a fight. The science has been clear for 20 years. We've won the argument. Now we have to figure out how to win the fight. And then he said, it's not that global warming is like a world war. It is a war, and we are losing. And here's what we have to remember as part of our car crash story about climate change. We are in a fight. We're not in a debate. We're not in an argument. We are in a fight. Let's look at the problem, simply put. Again, I think back to my friend Craig's hand caught in that metal. I wasn't able to see what the problem was, but my friend did. So I think it's really important we understand what the problem is. The things that Toby was saying earlier about floods and famines and forced migration, those are the symptoms. This is the problem. This is from the dropping of the atom bomb on Hiroshima. So here's my question for you, and I would love to have you put the answer, your answer to this question, in the chat room. Diane, you can't do that because you know what the answer is. So the question is, if we think of all of the heat and energy that's given off by one bomb the size of the Hiroshima bomb, how many Hiroshima bomb equivalents are we losing into the atmosphere every day? Go ahead and put whatever answer you have in the chat room. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat room right now, but that's okay. We'll come back to it. Raise your hand if you've put a number in the chat room. Just wave at me. Mark? Okay. Thank you, Virginia. Okay, so let's look at the problem another way. Simply put, there's no cost or penalties to the fossil fuel industry for spewing its garbage into the atmosphere, into the ocean. There's no other industry that is allowed to pollute without having to pay for it. There's no cost, there's no penalty for them doing it. There are between 400,000 and 500,000 Hiroshima bomb equivalents loosed into the atmosphere every day. Does that give you pause? This is the problem. The other things are the symptoms. The fossil fuel industry is not going to quit because there's so much money to be made and so lost. One estimate I saw was there are $27 trillion of oil assets and natural gas assets that the oil industry has on their books already. That means that if they have to strand those assets, if they have to write them off, their valuation goes down. They are not susceptible to reasoning. They're not susceptible to goodwill. And I'm not talking about all the people that work in the fossil fuel industry. I'm talking about the executives who make decisions. Government doesn't act because it is controlled by the fossil fuel industry and its enablers like the banks. And I want to be clear, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. Both parties are awash in fossil fuel money. And here's the bottom line. If we don't neutralize the power of the fossil fuel industry, we are doomed. Now, I said earlier, we're in a fight. And the fossil fuel industry is not just going to roll over. They're going to fight because they have so much at stake. So let's go back to the Bible for a second. Some wisdom from the New Testament. This quote is often misquoted as money is the root of all evil, but it's really the love of money that's the root of all evil, Paul saying in 1 Timothy. And we're going to talk about three crucial flows of money. The first one is our money flowing to what I call climate bad banks. Now, it's not just our money as individuals. Some of our churches may be investing in these climate bad banks. Our local governments might. There's a big divestment movement in the universities that university money, many students at Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, Stanford are trying to get the trustees to divest. And what our money does in these climate bad banks is it helps make them profitable. The second flow of money is the bank money to the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry cannot continue destroying the planet if they don't have loans, if they don't have insurance, if they don't have investments from investment banks. So that's a second flow of money that we have to be able to disrupt. The third one is the fossil fuel money to politicians, which immobilizes government. So many people, I think, say like, why can't government do what it's deal with these problems? The truth is government is pretty effective at responding to the needs of the people who control it. That's not us. We have got, this is blackened, and I want to shout this. I'm not going to shout it, but we have got to interrupt these flows of money, or all the good ideas in the world aren't going to see the light of day. So many people I know are focusing on, trying to get a price for fossil fuels. Bill McKibben has said, a tax on fossil fuels, a carbon tax. And I heard, I was on a webinar that he did recently, and he said, first of all, the fossil fuel industry is not going to let that happen as long as they control government. Secondly, the price has to be so high now. 10 years ago, it might have made some sense. If we don't interrupt these flows of money, then all these good ideas that people are talking about aren't going to make a difference. So Rainforest Action Network has done a fantastic job of research on climate bad banks. And if you look here, JP Morgan Chase is the #1, the worst. Billions of dollars invested. Wells Fargo, which is headquartered in San Francisco, right next door, second. Citibank third, Bank of America fourth. Then we go to the Royal Bank of Canada. MUFG is Union Bank. And if we go down to BNP Paribas, I don't know if you see that, it's right here above Goldman Sachs. That is the owning company of Bank of the West, which is doing a bunch of stuff for the environment, and it is getting a lot of publicity about it. And I don't have any information that Bank of West is doing bad things, but their parent bank is helping destroy the Amazon. So these are the targets of what we're going to be talking about next, which is what we're calling a Move Your Money initiative. Now, the goal is to interrupt that first flow of money, the money from us in all of our forms, to climate bad banks. But there's a problem. The problem is it's complicated. And people generally don't follow through on their desire to divest. I know people who have been activists around the environment for many years, and they haven't done it yet. So what's the solution? Well, our organization, this is what we did, is created a cohort model. Now, a cohort is simply a group of people who go through the same experience together. In the cohort model, modest time commitment, 1 hour a week for 6 weeks, information and templates provided, step by step, here's the things you need to do to divest from your climate bad banks, a public commitment. Now, this is not anybody imposing this commitment on you. This is you saying, I really want to do this. So by next Friday, I will do this. And it works so well. I had to, part of my paycheck is going to a donation account at Stanford Federal Credit Union, but the bulk of it was going to Wells Fargo. So I had to get into my account to be able to change that. And they asked me 2 security questions. They said, where did you meet your wife or your spouse? And who's your favorite teacher? So I said, I met my wife in St. Paul, Minnesota, and my favorite teacher was Polly Ames. And they said, those are the wrong answers. Now, normally what I would have done, I said, I don't have time for this. I got other things, I'll come back to it. And then I wouldn't have come back. But that was Friday morning. And our cohort met at Friday noon. And I did not want to tell people, oops, I didn't get it done. So I stuck with it and I figured it out. And I was able to move my direct deposit from Wells Fargo to Stanford Federal Credit Union. And then there's support, encouragement, teamwork. You're doing this together. And it's really, and it expands your influence. You know, one person sends, moves their money. Maybe they send a letter to the CEO of their bank. Maybe they walk into the branch and hand a letter there. But when you're doing it together, it makes so much difference. And then it's fun. It's just fun. And I think people really look forward to getting together on Friday. Now, I wrote up something I called my dream sequence. When I think I said at the beginning of this talk that the first workshop I did when I started Positive Coaching Alliance, there were 5 people there, and 2 of them were colleagues of mine. Only 2 coaches were there. When I walked away as a CEO, we were doing 3,500 live workshops a year, 10 a day. Here's my dream sequence, that this idea of a cohort to move your money catches on, and we have 1, 2, 5, 10 a day with 10 people each. Or can we get to 100 a day? Because, well, let me go on. Why are these people happy? This is our cohort, and they're happy because they earned their piggy button. They got out of their climate bad banks. And Sarah, Bruce, who's here today, helped design this piggy bank. And Sandy and I came up with this little ditty about away from B of A, city, such a pity, a pace, that means fast. I cut from the chase, go from Wells Fargo. Now, what did people say about being in that cohort? I wanted to get out of Wells Fargo for 2 years, and in 6 weeks, I finally done it. I feel so much integrity having done this. The scaffolding provided was a great help. I wasn't on my own. I wanted to do what I said I would do because I wanted my group to be proud of me. That's why these people were happy. Now, I want to talk, before we open this up, and we're pretty close to opening up for questions, I want to talk about 2 huge things that we have to save the planet. The first one is we need a societal mobilization on a scale larger than World War II. And this mobilization needs to be worldwide. The United States is no longer the biggest contributor to climate change. It's now China, but we're number 2. And one of the things Bernie Sanders, when he was running for president, he said, first thing he would do, he would get all the leaders of these big countries together. We've got to have that mobilization. The second thing is we need a movement that can gain political power to make this mobilization possible, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to make it happen, and it's not going to be easy to implement it. And this is a picture that's one of the I'm most proud of. This is my mother. Those of you from our church knew my mother, Marjorie. At that time, she was Marjorie Score. Then she got married, Marjorie Thompson, and Marjorie Bierkager. She was a Rosie the Riveter, and she worked in a Convair bomber factory in San Diego, building the B-24 Liberator bomber that my Uncle Wally flew in Europe. We had, I wasn't alive then, but everybody around had a victory garden, because that's one of the things that President Roosevelt said. And people were saving metal. The big deal was that there was a mobilization of industry. Ford Motor Plant stopped building in some of their factories cars and trucks and started building the B-24 Liberator bomber. They built a plant that was 1 mile long. And Franklin Roosevelt said, I need 50,000 planes. And at its peak, this plant in Dearborn, Michigan, produced one bomber, one B-24 bomber per hour. Now, there are a lot of reasons why the Allies won World War II. One of them was the Russians sacrificed a lot to beat the Nazis trying to invade Russia. But a big part of it was this mobilization. We've got to have this mobilization. And it's not going to be easy. Again, I said we're in a fight, we're in a fight. The second thing we need, well, let me ask you this. Is technology going to save us? Well, the answer is yes, it could save us if we expand our definition of what we mean by technology and talk about nonviolent resistance. If we think about non-cooperation, nonviolent resistance as a technology, it's one of our last hopes. You know, Gandhi is thought of as a spiritual leader. He and Nehru and others were leading a huge movement. And there's some really interesting research done by Erica Chenoweth at Harvard Kennedy School and Maria Stephan. They wrote a book called Why Civil Resistance Works. And they've got databases of a whole bunch of civil resistance movements. They concluded, first of all, that nonviolence works better than violence. And the reason is interesting, because one of the things we really talk about and we want to do with This Is What We Did is to create easy access on-ramps for people to get into the movement. Well, if it's a violent resistance movement, how many of us are going to pick up a rifle and do that? Even if it's the most important thing in the world. A nonviolent resistance movement has many more opportunities for people to get involved. And the real mind boggler of this, and some of you, if you heard Jane Fonda speak recently on the radio or whatever, she talked about 3.5% of the population. This number came from Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stephan. When 3.5% of the population of a country supports a movement, it's not guaranteed, but the chances that that movement becoming successful go way up. Anybody got an idea? I know you can't talk. An idea of what the population of the United States is and what 3.5% of that is? It's 11.6 million people. I don't know about you, but that seems to me very doable. Now, let's go back to spirituality. My definition of spirituality is the practical ways we orient ourselves to the sacred. So it's really about the actions we take to get closer to the things that are sacred to us, the people, the places. And maybe there's nothing more sacred than our planet to us. Now, Gordon and Mary Cosby, Gordon Cosby was a minister and Mary was his wife, and they started the Church of Savior in 1947. Gordon Cosby was a chaplain in World War II, and he saw something that troubled him. And this is what he saw. He said, you should be able to tell the difference between churched people and unchurched people. And as a chaplain in World War II in Europe, he could not tell. He could not tell by the way people behaved if they went to church or not. And he wanted to create a church where you could tell the difference. The Church of the Savior has spun off 10, 20, 30 different organizations that help poor people. One of them was started by Killian Noe, who is the founder of the original Recovery Cafe in Seattle that Urban Sanctuary San Jose modeled in creating our Recovery Cafe San Jose. Now, when Sandy and I, whenever we go to Washington, D.C., we try to be there on a weekend so we could go to the Church of the Savior and go to a church service. And one time I was there and Mary Cosby was preaching instead of Gordon. And she talked about the elements of call. And let's think about this as a spiritual call. She said, it's recurring. If you don't answer the call, if you ignore it, it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. It seems impossible. If it's like, well, I really want to plant a garden, that's my call. No, that's not that hard to do. It's got to seem really hard. And the third thing is, it's downwardly mobile. Now, we might have an opportunity to take a job that pays a lot of money, has a lot of prestige, but that's not part of a call. It's recurring, it keeps banging you on the head, or that still small voice keeps coming to you. It seems impossible, and it doesn't win you plaudits from other people. Okay, almost done here. When I was researching and studying and talking to people and writing about climate change, I decided the ultimate question we all have to answer is, what did you do? This is a question coming to us in the future. It might be a literal question. It might be that my grandson, Rafi, or my granddaughter, Lila, says, Grandpa Jim, what did you do? The world's falling apart. What did you do to stop it? I feel called to be able to answer that question in a way that makes me feel proud. And I really can't give any talk or be in any kind of meeting without some poetry. So I'm going to quote Mary Oliver. What do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? There's a lot, I know some of you are working on getting out the vote, and people are now talking about making a plan to vote. You know why they're asking people to make a plan to vote? Because if you make a plan to do it, you're more likely to do it. If you say, okay, there's a box I can drop my ballot in over at the Saratoga Library. I need to take some books back. On Thursday afternoon, I'm going to drop off my ballot. That's my plan. If I do that, I'm much more likely to do it. So one of the things I'd like you all to think about is, how do you want to answer this question? What do you want to be able to say that you did to fight climate change? What do you want to plan to do with your one and wild and precious life? Let's talk about some right now actions. One of the things you can do if you're in a climate bad bank is join a Move Your Money cohort. We're going to start up another cohort or two pretty soon. If you're not, use your influence to get is your church. Where's your church have its money? What financial institution does it have it? If you're a member of a alumni group, where's your university investing their money? Cutting off this supply. Bill McKibben calls it, money is the oxygen of the fossil fuel industry. And if we can get the fossil fuel industry to say, like George Floyd, I can't breathe, that's a good example of that. Second thing you can do is talk about what you learned in this workshop. Talk to friends, relatives, and not necessarily people who are already agreeing that climate change is a problem. You know, I went to this workshop Friday night on climate change, and I learned and picked something interesting like, did you know there are 20 million acres of farmland in the Midwest that weren't able to be farmed last year? That really bothers me. Or did you know that the equivalent of 400,000 to 500,000 Hiroshima equivalent bombs are being dropped? That heat is being, and then listen to them. Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist at Texas Tech. And she talks about conversations. She says, if you don't talk about something, you can't care about it. If you don't care about it, you won't act on it. So action starts with conversation. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're developing a training program on how to be a conversationalist about climate change. Sandy, I don't think I can unmute you, so I'm going to tell your story for you. Sandy's father, Ralph, again, those of you with Urban Sanctuary San Jose knew Ralph well, an amazing guy like my mother. He left us some money, left Sandy some money in the Bank of the West. And Sandy just did research and found out about PNB Paribas. And so she decided she's going to take her money out of Bank of the West. She went in, she got all the money out. She went in, they said, you have to come in person to do it. So she went in and she had this really wonderful start of a conversation with the guy who worked there. And she said, you know, I'm taking my money out because of climate change. And he said, oh, you know, we're doing all this good stuff. And she said, yeah, but your parent company is bad. And he shut down immediately. That was the end of the conversation. And she said to me afterwards, I think she still feels bad about it. She said, I could have kept that conversation going. I could have said, yeah, I know your bank is doing that, but you know, I just can't be affiliated with your parent bank. And that's what Catherine Hayhoe is talking about, is getting people to talk about this, because if we don't talk about it, we can't care about it. If we don't care about it, we can't act. Connect with, this is what we did. Ask for a presentation for an organization you're involved with. We've got a website that'll be launching in a week or two, and we got a lot more initiatives coming. You know, we're focusing right now on that flow of money from us to the banks, because that's where we can have impact initially. It's crucial that we interrupt that flow of money from the fossil fuel industry to the politicians. And we've got an initiative coming up that we're planning to work on that. So email me. This is my email, jt.thisiswhatwedid@gmail.com. If you want, I'd love to be able to talk to as many people as possible. So if you want an organization, for you, there's no cost. There's no cost to it for anybody. So let me end with this. This is our website, the landing page on our website. The picture of me and my granddaughter Lila, that was taken by my daughter-in-law when we were at Cayucas a while back. And when you go to the landing page, there's the place to click that says, that orange box, who are we, who we are. Well, this is who we are. We're everyday people who will organize and fight and never give up, so that we can say with absolutely no regret, this is what we did. So Jim Thomas, can we, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll go back to it if people have questions on it. Can we unmute people? How do you want to, okay, wait a minute. I looked at the chat room. We've got 1 million. Mark, that's pretty good. 1,000, 1,000, 200,000, pretty good. 30, 10, 100, 22, 10,000, 44, 150, 200,000, 1 million. Okay, you guys are, you're good. Jim Thomas, can we unmute people and raise your hand and try to take your questions?
If you don't know how to raise your hand, you can sort of wave your hand, and if I see it, then I'll ask you to unmute. But if you open up your participants window at the bottom, there's a raise hand button. Just click on that, and then I'll call on you.
Do we have a first mover here?
Don, go ahead.
Hey, Jim, thanks for all the wonderful work that you're doing. Really appreciate your insights and a very engaging presentation. I'm curious, given the three-step flow of money that you're describing, what do you think about the efforts to get candidates for office to sign pledges not to take fossil fuel money?
Yeah, the initiative that we're working on is probably going to require us, we're a 501c3, so if you donate money to us, you can get a tax deduction. We're probably going to have to create a 501c4 because what we're going to be talking about is may cross the line into political activity. But we're talking about a two-level pledge. The first level is a pledge that we take. I will not support any politician who takes money from the fossil fuel industry. And then we want people to bird dog their politicians. And let's start at the local level. Mayors, city council people, county commissioners, water commissioners. Some of these people are going to emerge as potential Senate candidates. They're going to, you may even be talking to somebody who's going to be run for president someday. Let's get them early. One of the things Bill McKibben said to me was that the fossil fuel industry controls Congress, but they don't control every state and all the local governments because they just don't have that much bandwidth. So let's start there, take the pledge, and then bird dog your representatives to get them to take a similar pledge that they won't take the money. Good thinking, Don. Who's next?
Carl from Vallejo, California. My question would be, so you transfer your money to a different bank, what would stop them from loaning money to the fossil fuel?
Good question, Carl. First of all, one of the things you get if you're part of a cohort, this is what we did, cohort, move your money, is a lot of research has been done. We've done some of it, and we've collated people have done. So as far as we know, there's not a single credit union that is invested in the fossil fuel industry. So credit unions are a good place to go. There are banks that are recommended. There's three that we know of: Amalgamated, Aspiration, and Beneficial, which was started by a classmate of mine from Stanford, Kat Taylor, who happens to be Miriam Steyer, who ran for president. And so, what would keep those three banks from investing in fossil fuels? I think they've been set up specifically to do this kind of thing. Michael Town, can unmute him? Can I do it?
I've already asked him to. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Judge
Okay.
Town.
Very, very briefly, I work with prison reform. One of this Mother Superior told me 40 years ago, be like St. Luke, who rather than trying to cure people that are sick, is make people healthy, and that a judge should free people, not lock them up. And I think it's the same thing you're talking about here. We need to incentivize having a healthy climate, figure out a way to do it. And what I'm working on now is jails could be equity centers, not places with handcuffs. So I think it's the perspective that you bring that's so important here, to be positive about it and look at positive, what I call equity centers. And I love what you're saying. It may be a little attenuated that I'm mentioning, but it's working because we're the most over-imprisoned country in the world, and we're one of the most polluted countries, and the two are highly correlated.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In the chat, Lonnie Stoner, I should have mentioned credit cards. Thank you for raising that. In our first cohort, we had people with with savings and checking accounts, with credit cards, and with mortgages that they refinance. So those are the 3 places we're starting. If you have a credit card with Chase or one of the climate bad banks, if you have a savings or checking account with one of them, or if you have a loan mortgage, and the people, the 2 folks who were refinanced, it was a really good time. A better. You have another question?
Yeah, I'm thinking that
Don
I could
Marusta?
I'm thinking that I could probably have more leverage through institutions like the universities that I'm an alum of and so on. Is there some easy way to find out which ones are still invested in fossil fuels, and to find out who's mobilizing efforts to divest? Because they have a lot of leverage and a lot of public notoriety that would come from their movements. And if there's some way to find out who they are, and what the opportunities are, I'm just thinking, do they hit me up for donations? That's a great leverage opportunity to say, well, I'm not going to donate to you if you're going to use that money and put it in an endowment that's going to be funding fossil fuels.
Yep.
And we have reunions and everything else. I mean, we could really kind of mobilize a lot of people fast on one item.
Yeah, that's a really lovely idea. I'll tell you what, Don, why don't you and I both do a little research on that, and we'll put our heads together. I'll definitely look into it. Not this weekend, however. Lonnie, let's see. Are you unmuted, Lonnie, yet? Is it Lonnie or Laney?
Yeah, she can unmute.
It's Lonnie. It's Lonnie.
Hi.
Yeah, I just typed in the other portion of my question. My situation is that my money's primarily in a credit union with their loans and credit cards, but then I've got two non-union credit cards, and I was just realizing they're probably with these mega banks that are feeding the fossil fuel stuff.
So there's. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is some of the research we did as part of the first cohort, and there's a couple ways to go. Many credit unions have credit cards. The 3 banks that we mentioned, Aspiration, Beneficial, and Amalgamated, and I'm forgetting which is which, but 2 of them have credit cards, and one is about to get one. And then you can and again, if you're part of a cohort that which I would really love to have you be, you'll get information about that. But there are green credit cards. Give a percentage of their money to an environmental group. Unfortunately, it's not. This is what we did. But does that answer your question, Lonnie? You got muted again, unfortunately. I think you can unmute yourself now, maybe?
Yeah. The information on the green credit cards and those banks that you were just mentioning that apparently are more green, that's possibly on your website or what?
It will be once our website launches, another week or so.
Okay, but it's not there yet.
Well, some of it's there, but it's not.
Okay, so you mentioned Beneficial. What are the other?
Beneficial State Bank, Aspiration, and Amalgamated.
Okay.
Beneficial is in the headquarters is Oakland. Amalgamated's headquarters in San Francisco, and Aspiration, I don't know where their headquarters are. They're totally virtual.
Thank you.
So
Diane?
Mark Cole. And then who? Diane?
Yes.
Mark,
I just wanted to say,
yeah.
Am I?
Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Okay. I just want to say that that I had a credit card. I had everything with Chase. I had credit cards and bank accounts, but I also had a credit card that was with Capital One, and that isn't listed on the list of banks, big banks that are funding fossil fuels. And I don't know if they're owned by one of those. But what I did find out when I just went online and did a little bit of research is that Capital One does contribute to fossil fuels. So I am closing that account. I closed that account. So individual ones like that, you can find out whether they are good or bad.
Yeah. Diane was in our first cohort. So let's see, Mark.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thanks for pulling us together around this. Thanks for what you've done to start your new organization.
Mark, you might tell us where you're from, where you are right now.
Hey, I'm sitting just outside of Lander, Wyoming. It's about the best place to be riding out this COVID-19 situation. But anyway, I'm a bit of a literalist, and so when I saw the title, "What's a Christian to Do About Climate Change?" I expected a little more focus on the Christian aspect of this. And for full disclosure, hey, I'm not blessed with very much faith, but I think the title could have been, what is a caring, thoughtful person to do about climate change? So, just an observation there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I gave a I gave a sermon at our church last summer on this topic, and then I was scheduled to speak at the Christian Church Northern California Nevada conference. It was supposed to be April 23rd, and by the time I got around to sitting down to do the talk, it turned out to be slightly different. There's I think my wife and I are, in addition to being Christians and members of Urban Sanctuary San Jose, we also follow Thich Nhat Hanh and his meditation mindfulness practice. And in the 11th mindfulness practice, it says, we will not, followers of Thich Nhat Hanh, we will not invest in any company that destroys the planet. I'm summarizing a little bit. And one of the things I think would be really interesting is to circulate a proposal like that among Christian churches. Because it goes beyond, well, it said, it also talked about not working for a company that is destroying the planet or investing in it. But, truth in advertising, Mark, if you were coming here wanting to get more religious talk, I'm sorry. It evolved as I was working on it the last week or two. Lonnie, I want to read what you wrote in the chat room, because I love it. With grace and gentleness, with non-judgmental attitude, we move forward openly, supporting all in efforts to make our environment more sustainable. Did you want to say more about that, Lonnie? That's beautiful. I think you unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, but then a thing got right in front of me. How can I put this? When you talk about faith and you talk about growth in belief and that underpinning of here's what I feel is important, here's what I believe, and here's how I can live it. I don't know if this helps answer the question that the last gentleman had, but I started as not really an atheist. I grew up with parents that were atheist agnostic. My daughter says they were druids. But and I came into Christian faith after the birth of my son. Well, before the birth of my son, because I'd lost a baby in between. My family, my husband's family, rather, were First Christian Church for decades. And so it was a very slow path for me coming into Christianity and finding ways to live that faith. But yet I was brought up with a very, very solid base of a belief system of do no evil, and of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I mean, the golden rule, so deeply ingrained in me that I don't remember very many times, if any, that I purposefully did things to hurt others. Well,
Right.
when I work on it, I can probably think of it. But does that answer, the gentleman's question? I don't know. You don't necessarily need to have an organized belief system from a faith to be able to uphold this kind of concept.
Thank you, Lonnie. Sandy, I'll get to you in a second. Mark, when I started Positive Coaching Alliance, I was early on, one of the first years or so. I was in a workshop down in Southern California somewhere, and this long line of people afterwards talked to me. And one guy was kind of hanging back, and he waited till the very end, till everybody was gone. And he came up to me and said, "Are you a Christian?" And I'm thinking, uh-oh. So I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I thought so." And then he walked away. And with Positive Coaching Alliance, I felt like what we were promoting, the way that coaches should treat kids should treat each other, parents should treat their kids, etc., was totally consistent with Christianity. But of course, if we became known as a Christian organization, we would lose a lot of people. Sandy, and then Virginia.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just going to add a little bit, Jim, when you're talking about the conversation about my experience in going to the bank.
Yeah.
And I was kind of triggered by Lonnie's comment that having a non-judgmental attitude and being open and being gentle will move things forward. And, when I went into the bank and the fellow asked me, why are you, I'm curious, he said, why are you leaving Bank of the West? And I said, because of the climate, policy, and it was a bad climate bank, et cetera. And then he started telling me some of the beautiful, good things they're doing. And they're really doing some great things. I think they're not loaning money to coal unless the coal company has a plan for getting out of coal. And they're donating money, and they're really, and I could have said, I've read about what Bank of the West is doing, and wow, I think we have some real similar values that we both feel, that it's important to save the planet and to get out of this. And then he would have felt heard and validated, and we could share that similar value. And then I could have said something like, I wish your mother bank that owned you felt that way. But they're investing millions. I think they're the largest investor in Europe now for fossil fuel. And, maybe you could mention this, at your staff meeting, that I could have had an ally, and he could have brought that up. And I think the idea of the gentleness and the openness, because what happens, especially in our culture right now with our political system, is the minute I push my point of view and I do it in a way that doesn't allow that other person to be heard, we're not going to move forward. I think I am really excited, and I hope people will tune into This Is What We Did, because I'm really excited about getting training on how we can have those kinds of conversations with people who maybe don't feel the way we feel. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Sandra. If you do, one way to communicate with us, you can just put your email in the chat room or send me an email. Virginia.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's really good to hear you and see all these familiar faces from around the region and outside. I just wanted to say, you know, I was feeling really virtuous that our church had our money in Bank of the West, but I didn't realize that its parent bank is the problem. So,
Lorraine and I just traded emails, so we'll work on that. We have a Paycheck Protection Program grant going at that bank, so we have to wait until that grant or that loan is forgiven and turned into a grant. But we're thinking about it. But then I also, you know, the Christian Church Foundation is sort of the savings bank for a lot of disciples churches, and I know they have huge endowments, and well, not huge, but people have donated money for certain purposes that they hold, and then the income off that money, you know, goes to ministries, all kinds of ministries all over the world. But I'm just wondering, sometime next time when we have what's his name, Jerry, the guy, the financial advisor from that that institution, I guess we can ask him kind of what the investment practices are. I don't think they invest in fossil fuels, but
I think they're taking a very smart business approach, and they're segregating all their bad stuff. Well, maybe not all their bad stuff, but Jerry Lang, Lorraine said.
thanks. Yeah.
But I think it's I don't trust any bank really. So I want to say one other thing. Oh, wait a minute, Kimberly Brown. I understand about moving money. However, as consumers, what products do we purchase made from fossil fuels? Well, almost everything we do is made from fossil fuels. I know there's an effort going on. A woman I know in Palo Alto is launching a program on plastics. Clearly, you know, we just turned our old car in for, you know, the buyback program. And I think one of the things I promised in this talk that I just couldn't work in was the 3 tiers of actions for the planet. And the first tier is consumers. What can we do as consumers? And business, the powers that be want us to think of ourselves as consumers. That doesn't scare them. You know, like, they're not going to have 50 million people buying electronic vehicles. But we should try to limit our carbon footprint anyway. The second step or tier is as a citizen. And that's where, you know, getting to know our elected officials, confronting them, the conversation type of thing. But the third tier is really where the action is, and that's what I call solidarity actions, where we're doing something together. It's great if an individual, and we had some, actually, Sandy and other people reached out to their friends. I know Diane did, and people were saying, I don't need that group. I'm going to do it by myself. Well, first of all, I know a lot of people said they're going to do it by themselves. They haven't done it yet. But secondly, one of the things Bill McKibben says is the first thing we got to do is stop being an individual. Join an organization, get involved with other people. Let's help create community while we're doing this. I need an attorney to speak. So Joe Scally, are you still here? Or did you leave?
I'm here, Jim.
So what can you share with us from Chicago, Joe?
Well, I feel kind of embarrassed to say this. I've been working on Congressman Sean Casten's campaign, and we helped get him elected 2 years ago, and he's facing a tough election fight this year. And he's a real advocate for addressing climate change. But I'm embarrassed to say I don't know if he takes any fossil fuel money. And I'm going to ask now. I don't think that he does, because he is very pro-climate. But I'm gonna ask that question. And he's got a very solid proposal to address climate change. It doesn't go quite as far as the Green Act, but it's pretty comprehensive. And he was a climate scientist before he got elected. So that's kind of my way of addressing this, is to keep people like that in government so that they can keep this problem front and center.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Oh, Stephanie, I know you're from near Zion National Park, and you've got a bunch of people with you. Can we see you, and can you say something about why you're here and what, most of us here are a little older, and you guys are in college. Sometimes when you put people on the spot, it doesn't work out. Stephanie? There we go.
Hi, sorry. We were talking about stuff. Sorry, I didn't hear your question. Can you? Oh.
I just wanted you to say something about what's going on with you. Yeah, I just wanted to hear from you, because I know you're coming from college in near the Four Corners, isn't it, or wherever it is? It's near Zion National Park.
I can't hear you.
One of the things.
Wait, we can't hear you. Try it on your computer. It's not working.
Okay, that's fine. One of the things that we've with this is that we've concluded that we work with anybody, but that we think people who are 50 years old and older are an untapped resource on climate change, and so we're really focusing on that. Stephanie, I'm sorry to put you on a spot like that. So we got 5 more minutes. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Helen. Off now.
Okay, now I think I can talk.
There we go. Thank you.
I'm Helen Boyer, and I'm from Niles Discovery Church in Fremont, California. And we are a Disciples of Christ United Church of Christ church. So we're a blended congregation. And I know that this is a Disciples of Christ workshop. And admittedly, for me, I have been a United Church of Christ person since the early 1950s. So it's a learning experience to be working with people from Disciples of Christ. But I did want to share that one of the resources that we've been using, and I don't know if I can make this appear, is this amazing book called Climate Church, Climate World by the Reverend Jim Antal of the United Church of Christ. And our church has been reading this book. And another group of our church read it about 2 years ago. And I think that one of the things that's so important for all of us in our churches is that we need help. We need help like this workshop that we're having today. We need people to contact. We need to be able to work together. I think you really emphasize that if you have someone to support and cheer you on, you'll get things done much, much better. And a lot more easily. So I just wanted to put in a plug for this book because we're using it. And the members of our green team are really trying to come to as many trainings and workshops. And so for people who are looking for help, there's plenty of help there. And I just want to
Helen, Sandy and I went to the meeting at the United Church of Christ in Palo Alto, where he spoke last year. And I have a book. It's a great book, and he's doing great things. So thanks for sharing that. I would let me make a pitch. It's called Climate. What is the name of it, Helen? Climate World by Jim Antal. So I'd like to, in the 2 minutes that we have, first of all, thank you. I told you about that first workshop with Positive Coaching Alliance, and I'm glad there were more than 5 people here. Second, really would love to get you connected to This Is What We Did. So please send me an email. It is just JT at, I'm going to put it in the chat room. JT, this is what we did at gmail.com. Did I get it right? Yes. And I want to say one thing about the earlier conversation. I get really angry about what the fossil fuel industry is doing to this planet and the future of our kids. And I think often about Jesus driving the money changers from the temple. And I don't want to be in a state of anger all the time. And one of the things that I think This Is What We Did, we call it this. One of the things that this is really going to try to do is to create community, give us some really practical things we can do, so we can feel like I want to make the climate bad banks and the fossil fuel industry. I want to make them angry by the things that we do to keep them from destroying the planet. So thank you. Please send me an email, and we'll get you hooked up. And really a pleasure to see all of you. Thanks, everybody.